long as you're following through enough for them to know that you're gonna get to their idea, they'll keep giving them to you. And I also think, I talked about sort of teacher documentation on this piece as well, but it's also important to help kids do their own documentation through that process. So that could look like them drawing pictures themselves. It could look like getting the digital cameras out and letting kids document it with their photographs. It could look like you writing down what they have to say about it. So we want to engage them in that documentation process as well. Do I have till 2:15 on your agenda? Okay. The reminder. All right, so the main things that you can do, we talked about setting up the environment, right? Like having the open-ended materials, but you can do all of that and then walk away. And maybe a few kids will come over and grab some materials or engage, but probably not everybody, and it will stop at a certain place. So the real piece of it then comes into these questions, this intentionality around the questions. How, these are examples of how you focus kids' attention. So you're not children, but I focused your attention on this by saying, you're gonna solve a problem, and here's an example of how I would solve a problem, but I gave you something to do. I didn't just say, come up and grab some materials and play for a while and then we'll get back together. You want to encourage those observation skills, and to really encourage their problem solving. And again, it's that organizational piece at the end. Why do you think that happened? Like, you've seen these questions before, the WH questions, right? So really super important when collaborating with kids in their science explorations. All right, so going back to NIAC here. So when we start to work on our portfolios for our reaccreditation, we'll be going back and thinking about what they're sort of saying they like to see in high quality programs. So the main place that they address science curriculum is their topic 2G, and it addresses the plans that programs have for experience and materials that supports children's scientific inquiry and knowledge. The simple tools, representation of findings, that's that documentation piece, and the use of scientific terminology and vocabulary. So as we sort of start to think about prepping for that process of reaccreditation, I would invite you to think about the sort of science preparations that you make in your classroom. And this will be infants through preschool. They'll be assessing on the same standard. So think about that, and it will give you some time to explore that idea before you're asked to sort of show it. Right. The main thing that NECE says about science curriculum is that it's rooted in the experience of our senses. And when I read that, it was kind of a relief to me, because it showed me that they understand that it is all about how children take in information. So that, I think, can be helpful when you think about what sort of curriculum you're designing. They say infants, toddlers, and 2-year-olds begin to learn physics, chemistry, and biology when they have many chances to use their senses, to learn about objects in the environment, discover what they can make happen, and solve simple problems. And when I go into the infant and toddler classrooms, I see these materials that are available. I notice that teachers are very thoughtful about choosing materials and toys that allow children to experience cause and effect relationships, even when they are not sometimes intentionally doing the cause, right? They're still seeing the effect, they're revisiting that. So I know that we're doing that. They say preschoolers should be provided varied experiences and materials to learn key content and principles of science, and they gave some examples there as well. I also know that you're doing this. when I look at your daily notes to families or observing your classrooms, that you are giving children these opportunities, and doing it so in meaningful ways. I won't redo that slide. These are the last two things they sort of look for preschoolers being exposed to structure, properties, manner, and behavior of materials. So my hope in showing you that information from NIAC is to encourage you that you already are engaging in meaningful, science for kids to reassure you that we are on the right path. I'm gonna stop for a second. I know I've been talking for a while. Any thoughts that were raised throughout any of that? All right, so we are gonna go through now, just a little reminder and a summary. We think about modeling curiosity. I felt like all of you, once you sort of got over the hump, were able to do that with that experience that we had together in creative design. But I also I would invite you to think about how you're doing that in your everyday interactions with kids. One of the things that I have to remind myself all of the time is that kids in our care are having first experiences every day. Things that we have experienced so often. And I was thinking about this giant snowstorm that we just had. And for a lot of our kids, most of our kids, I don't know, you've been in Seattle longer than I have, this is the first time I've ever seen that much snow at one time, right? And it was annoying, and it caused us to have lots of problems and all of those things. But also, this was the first time those kids had ever seen that much snow. And so we also need to model our curiosity about these new experiences for them. Where did it all come from? How come it happened? You know, what can we do with it? How can we make it melt? How can we keep it, you know, around? So I think just reminding ourselves that the things that we know already, because we're adults in the world, kids know nothing about. And so, you know, taking the time to slow down and model that curiosity and making yourself available to encourage them to ask questions. You know, asking those questions, and then the second part of asking a question is listening. So giving them the opportunity, you know, taking those few beats, you know, do they have an answer before I jump in and provide one? Just putting problem solving in general at the center of your curriculum. You know, whenever you're thinking about introducing something new, whether it be new materials or new songs or new activities, new small groups, you know, how can it go, you know, how can the center of it be around solving a problem? And then this other part that I think is always important for us to remember in every aspect of our lives is that failure is not an outcome, it's just part of the problem solving process. And what a beautiful lesson that we can teach young children to know that, like, you know, hey, like, yes, at this point, you're not getting it, or this is hard, or this is not working, but that's not the outcome. That's just part of the process. Right. So we're gonna wrap it up.